It was supposed to be just another Saturday. The kind of day when the air smelled of fresh grass and paint thinner, when you tell yourself you're finally going to fix that fence you've been ignoring for months. I had a brush in my hand, sweat dripping down my back, and a streak of white paint running across my forearm, ordinary until she appeared. She stepped onto her porch like the scene was staged. A white blouse, too elegant for yard work, clung just enough to suggest she had dressed that way on purpose. Her blonde hair was tied back loosely, wisps escaping and catching the afternoon sun. She leaned on the railing, watching me with that half-smile that always made me feel both younger and older than I was. "You finally decided to paint it," she called, her voice lilting with mock surprise. "Yeah," I muttered, pretending to focus on the brush strokes. "Figured it was time." She tilted her head, walked closer, the wooden boards of her porch creaking softly. Then she bent slightly, lowering her voice as though sharing a secret meant only for me. The world seemed to shrink to that single moment. "Paint the fence?" she whispered, her breath warm against my ear. "And I'll show you something you'll never forget." The words hit harder than the summer heat. My hand froze mid-stroke, paint dripping to the ground. I turned, but she had already straightened, her smile coy, daring me to ask what she meant. "That's quite the motivation," I managed, my voice cracking. "Motivation," she echoed, her eyes sparkling with amusement. "Maybe it's a challenge or maybe just a reward." She leaned against the fence close enough that I could see the fine curve of her collarbone where her blouse slipped open ever so slightly. I swallowed hard, my brush trembling in my hand. Her gaze dropped to my fingers, gripping the wood, then rose slowly back to meet my eyes. "You don't believe me?" she teased, her tone light, but edged with something sharper. My throat was dry. "I'm not sure what you mean." Her laughter was soft, wicked, filling the empty air between us. "Oh, you know exactly what I mean," she said, and with a flick of her hair, she turned, walking back toward her porch. I stood there, paralyzed, my heart hammering. The ordinary act of painting had twisted into something dangerous, forbidden, impossible to ignore. Every brush stroke felt heavier, loaded with the question, what would she show me? From the corner of my eye, I saw her sit on the porch steps, a glass of iced tea in her hand, her gaze never leaving me. She sipped slowly, deliberately, as if each movement was meant to remind me of the promise she'd left hanging in the air. By the time the sun dipped lower, painting the sky orange, I had barely finished half the fence. My arms were sore, but it wasn't the paint that weighed on me. It was her words echoing with every beat of my pulse when I finally set the brush down. She leaned forward, her elbows on her knees, her smile wider now. "Not bad," she said. "But remember, only when you finish you'll see." She stood and disappeared into her house, the screen door slamming shut behind her. I stared at the half-painted boards, my chest tight, my head spinning. I had no idea if she was teasing, testing, or truly promising something more. But one thing was clear. I would paint until my hands bled just to find out. The next day, the sun blazed hotter, the paintbrush heavy in my hand. I tried to focus on the boards, but her words still clung to me like the scent of fresh paint. "I'll show you something you'll never forget." Every stroke felt like a countdown. When I finally stopped to wipe the sweat from my forehead, she was already there, sitting on her porch with a tall glass of iced tea, legs crossed elegantly, watching me. Her blouse was lighter this time, sleeveless, the golden light turning her skin almost luminous. "You work too hard," she called, her tone teasing. "Come sit before you melt." I hesitated, but her smile pulled me in more than her words. I set the brush down and walked over. She moved slightly to the side on the step, patting the space beside her. I sat, awkward at first, but the scent of jasmine from her hair and the coolness of her presence made the heat bearable. She handed me a glass. "Drink," she said softly. "You've earned at least that much." The tea was cold, but her knee brushing against mine set me burning again. Neither of us moved away. Her hand rested lazily on her thigh. Her nails painted a pale color that caught the sun. My eyes lingered, then darted away too quickly. Still painting, she murmured, her voice low. But do you even know what you're painting for? I swallowed hard. For you, apparently. Her laugh was soft but sharp, slicing through the air. She leaned closer, her shoulder pressing against mine, her lips almost brushing my ear. You say that, she whispered. But when it counts, you always stop right here. Her finger traced the air just above my wrist. Never touching, but close enough to make my skin ache for contact. My hand twitched, wanting to close the gap to hold hers. But I froze. She noticed. Of course, she noticed. She always did. Her smile curved wider, her voice dripping with mockery. Classic. You'd rather paint 1,000 fences than take one step closer. I'm not afraid, I muttered, though the words lacked conviction. Her eyes sparkled dangerous and amused. Then prove it. The silence between us thickened, the cicadas outside buzzing louder, the air heavy with everything unspoken. My breath quickened. I turned just enough that her lips were only inches away. For a suspended moment, I thought it would finally happen, that she'd let me erase the distance, cross the invisible line she dangled like bait. But she pulled back with a slow smile, reaching for her glass instead. She sipped calmly as if nothing had shifted, leaving me shaking beside her. Tea's good, isn't it? She said lightly, eyes glinting with cruel playfulness. I clenched the glass in my hand, heat surging through me. Every nerve screamed to break past hesitation. But she had already looked away, victorious in her silent game. When I finally stood to leave, she tilted her head, her voice floating after me like smoke. Don't be late tomorrow. Fences don't paint themselves. And though her words were ordinary, the way she looked at me made it feel like the promise of something far less innocent. The third day, the fence looked straighter, brighter. But I was a mess. My arms ached, my palms blistered. Yet I worked harder than ever. Not for the fence, never for the fence, but for her promise that still echoed in my head. She stepped outside just as I dipped the brush again. This time she wore jeans and a pale blouse, her hair tied back in a loose ponytail, strands falling over her cheek. She carried a watering can, moving across the lawn like she owned every inch of the sunlight. Still at it? She teased, pausing by the fence. Her eyes flicked to my hands, gripping the brush, then back to my face. I wonder if you even know what you're chasing. I opened my mouth to answer, but another voice interrupted. Looks like you've got help today. I turned. It was Mark, the neighbor from 2 doors down. Tall, broad-shouldered, with that smug smile that made me want to punch something. He strolled over, hands in his pockets, his eyes lingering on her a little too long. Need a hand? He asked, his voice smooth. She laughed lightly, tilting her head. Well, 2 men for 1 fence sounds like luxury. I tightened my grip on the brush. She never looked at me like that, not with that playful softness. And yet she let him stand close, let him lean toward her, their arms almost brushing. Mark picked up a spare brush, dipping it into the can like he belonged there. So what's the deal? He joked. Free labor in exchange for lemonade. Her smile lingered, but her eyes flicked to me, sharp, calculating. Not exactly, she said. Some rewards aren't meant for everyone. My chest burned. The fence blurred in front of me as jealousy gnawed through every nerve. I painted harder, faster, the wood rattling under my strokes. She noticed, of course she did. She always noticed. Mark kept talking, throwing out cheap jokes, trying too hard. She laughed at one of them, her hand brushing his arm. That simple touch stabbed me deeper than any insult. I nearly dropped the brush. Finally, when Mark wandered off to grab more paint, she stepped closer to me, her voice low enough only I could hear. You don't like competition, do you? Clenched my jaw. He doesn't matter. Her smile curved, slow and dangerous. She leaned in, her breath warm against my cheek, her words almost a purr. Then prove it. My heart hammered. My hand twitched, aching to reach for hers, to show her I wasn't afraid. For one suspended moment, the world fell silent except for the thrum of my pulse and the pull of her nearness. But the sound of Mark returning shattered it. She stepped back instantly, her smile perfectly composed, as if nothing had passed between us. "Thank you for the help," she told him sweetly. "But I think he's got it from here." Mark shrugged, oblivious, and walked off with a lazy wave. She turned back to me, her eyes glinting with wicked amusement. "Careful, Homer," she whispered, just loud enough to sting. "Fences aren't the only things that need painting." And before I could ask what she meant, she disappeared into her house, leaving me with blistered hands, a racing heart, and a jealousy I couldn't shake. It was almost midnight when the knock came, a quiet, deliberate tapping that pulled me out of half-sleep. I stumbled to the door, blinking against the porch light, and there she was. Her hair was loose this time, cascading over her shoulders in soft waves. A cardigan hung loosely around her frame, slipping off one shoulder as if it had been thrown on in a hurry. In her hand, she held a small box. "Sorry," she whispered, her voice low, careful not to wake the street. "Do you have a screwdriver?" Mine went missing. A screwdriver. At midnight, I almost laughed, but the way her eyes held mine killed the humor instantly. She wasn't here for tools. She was here for me. I stepped aside. She brushed past close enough that her perfume, jasmine, mixed with something darker, wrapped around me. She set the box down on my table, looking around my small living room with quiet curiosity. "You live so simply," she murmured, her fingers grazing the edge of the sofa. "No distractions, just you and whatever you're waiting for." I swallowed. "And what do you think I'm waiting for?" Her lips curved slow and knowing. She walked closer, each step unhurried, until she stood in front of me. Her eyes glimmered in the soft light, catching every hesitation in my face. "Something you're too afraid to reach for," she whispered, her hand lifted. Not quite touching, just hovering near my chest. My heart thudded so loudly, I was sure she could hear it. I froze, the space between us a knife's edge. One move forward and everything would change. But she pulled back suddenly, her smile widening. "Wicked." She turned, her cardigan slipping further down her arm as she crossed to the kitchen counter, picking up a glass, spinning it casually in her hand. "You still hesitate," she said lightly, almost playful, "even when the door's already open." My fists clenched at my sides. "Maybe I don't want to ruin it." Her eyes flicked back to mine, sharp and amused. "Or maybe you just don't know how to begin." She set the glass down, walked toward the door, and paused on the threshold. She leaned closer, her lips so near my ear that her whisper made me shiver. "You're almost there, Homer. Almost. But if you stop here again," she let the words trail off, her breath hot against my skin, "you'll never see what I meant." And then she was gone, the door closing softly behind her, leaving me in the heavy silence of my living room, trembling with the unbearable weight of her unfinished promise. I sank onto the couch, my pulse still racing, knowing with terrifying certainty. She was no longer teasing. She was daring me, testing me, and if I failed again, she'd never let me forget it. By the 5th day, the fence was finished. Every board painted, every blister on my hands a reminder of her words. I stood back, staring at the smooth white surface. But all I could think about was her promise. "I'll show you something you'll never forget." I wiped the sweat from my forehead and looked toward her porch. She was already there, leaning against the railing, arms folded. A simple sundress clung to her in the breeze, her hair loose, her eyes locked on me like she'd been waiting. "Well," she called, her voice drifting lazily across the yard. "You did it. Fence looks perfect." I swallowed hard and crossed the lawn, my pulse hammered louder with every step. When I reached the fence, she leaned down, resting her elbows on the top rail, her face inches from mine. "So," I said, trying to steady my voice, "it's done now. Show me." Her smile curved, slow and dangerous. She tilted her head, studying me as if deciding whether I'd passed some invisible test. "Funny thing," she whispered, her tone silk and smoke. "It was never about the fence." I froze. "Then what was it about?" Her eyes flicked down to my lips, then back to mine, holding me captive. about whether you'd finish something for once, about whether you'd prove you weren't all hesitation. My chest tightened. The heat between us felt unbearable. The world narrowing to her gaze, her voice, her nearness. I reached up, my fingers curling around the fence rail, my other hand twitching to bridge the impossible distance. "You've waited long enough," I muttered. She leaned closer, her breath brushing my cheek. "Then cross it," she whispered. "Cross the line or lose me forever." The silence throbbed. My heart slammed against my ribs. I leaned forward almost, but she pulled back at the very last second. Her laughter low, rich, cutting through me like fire. She straightened, her sundress swaying around her legs, her smile half mocking, half sad. "You almost did it," she said softly, her voice carrying both amusement and disappointment. "Almost, but not enough." I gripped the fence until my knuckles whitened. "I'm not afraid anymore," I said through clenched teeth. Her eyes softened just for a moment, and she leaned down again, so close her lips nearly brushed my ear. Her whisper was a blade. "Then prove it. One step, one breath, no hesitation." And with that, she turned, walking back toward her porch, her figure glowing in the fading sun. She didn't look back. I stood frozen at the fence, trembling with the weight of her challenge, my heart tearing between fear and desire. Her words echoed inside me, louder than ever. "Prove it or lose me forever." The painted boards gleamed in the twilight, but all I could see was her silhouette disappearing into the doorway, leaving me with the unbearable truth. The real fence wasn't wood at all. It was me.